Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Mach dich, mein Geist, bereit, which translates to Rise, my soul, to watch and pray. This is a pretty straightforward chorale. We're just going to hop right into the analysis. So 1 sharp in the key signature, we start on G major, we end on G major. I reckon we're in the key of G major for the majority of this piece. We start on a 1 chord, like I said, with the passing 7th in the bass. We then move to E, E, G, and C. That's C major in first inversion, so it's a 4-6 chord in the key of G major. And this G gets introduced in the bass, which turns the chord kind of into a 6-4 chord. I'll put that in there because that's kind of a motive that we see in some of the other phrases as well, so I figured it might be worth mentioning. We then have F sharp, A, and D. That's D major in first inversion. It's a 5-6 chord. It's our dominant, passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the alto. We then get D, D, F sharp, and B. So a bit of a deceptive progression here. We would expect our tonic triad, but here we get 3 in first inversion. That's 3-6. That then gets turned into F sharp, D, F sharp, and B, kind of getting turned into a 6-4 chord here on this beat, for and. And as we get ready for our imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, we have E, B, G, and G. That's E minor in root position. That's a 6 chord, and we would expect 6 to follow 3, cycle of falling fifths and whatnot. Passing 7th in the bass, we get C, E, G, and A. That's an A minor 7 chord in first inversion. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, and we have some non-chord tones happening in the lower 3 voices, D, D, F sharp, and A. That is an offbeat 5 chord, which is what makes this imperfect authentic cadence an authentic cadence, because we cadence on our tonic G, D, G, and B. Alright, looking ahead to our next phrase, it concludes with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, no modulations, but we do see kind of a balance, like there's a symmetry between the 2 phrases where the bass has the same contour, just in a different position in the clef. We have C, C, G, and E here. That's a root position C major triad, which is our 4 chord. Passing 7th in the bass, we get A, C, A, and F sharp. That's F sharp diminished over A, that's 7-6, another falling fifths progression. This chord turns into root position, C, C, A, and F sharp, second inversion, not root position, on 2 and, just like how the chord got turned into second inversion on 2 and as well. And then we get B, D, G, and G, which is a G major triad in first inversion, so 1-6. We're seeing kind of a common progression in terms of the structure of the chords. Not the same chords, but in terms of how they're rotated and what inversion they're in. Next chord we have here, after our neighbor tone in the alto and our passing tone in the bass, is a G major triad in root position, so G, D, G, and B. This is the slight deviation from what we have before. Here we have a first inversion 3 chord, and here we have a root position triad, so it does get inverted again, not the second inversion, but first inversion on beat 4 and. And as we get ready for our cadence, we have C, E, G, and A, another A minor 7 chord in first inversion. We then have D, D, F sharp, and A, which is a 5 chord D major with the passing 7th in the tenor. And then our last chord, of course, is G major. G, B, D, and G. Alright, then we have 2 short phrases. We've seen this form before in Bach. However, it's been a while, actually, since we've had these short, 4-beat phrases. But we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G major here. We start things off with D major in first inversion, F sharp, D, A, and D. It's a 5-6 chord. Passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the alto. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and A. That's just taking the chord and putting it in root position before the chord again goes to first inversion here. We just see a very long, it seems longer than it actually is because the harmonic rhythm's being subdivided into 8th notes rather than just the expected quarter notes for our 4/4 time music that we are typically looking at in the chorales. But with all of these inverting of the chords, it really does feel like a chord gets a lot of space, almost like the harmonic rhythm is in some cases 2 beats long rather than 1 beat long. And then of course we cadence on G major, G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad. Then very interestingly, we travel to a distant key. We travel to the key of A major, and this is more of its own separate idea, following a phrase in G major, and it follows the same principle except for the alto and the alto and the tenor switch roles. We have this downward passing tone pattern in the alto here, and then we get it in the tenor here, and of course the tenor's role becomes the alto's role, but we get the same progression. G sharp, B, E, and E is E major in first inversion. That's our 5 chord. Passing tones in the lower voices before we get E, G sharp, E, and E, which is a root position 5 chord, and that gets turned with this late 7 here into it's like E7 over G sharp here on this beat, but that's not super important to note. We'll just talk about it. And then we cadence on A major, A, E, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad. And the reason why Bach goes to A major here is we really could look at this phrase as just like a tonicization of 5 of 5, or a tonicization of 5 of 5, because really how this A is functioning is as our dominant in the key of D major. And if you look ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so this 5 chord immediately takes us into the key of D major elides, which is often how Bach's phrases operate in the chorales. So 5 goes to D major, F sharp, D, A, and D. So D major in first inversion. Passing tones in the lower voices, we get D, F sharp, A, and A. That's a D major triad in root position that then gets turned back into first inversion on beat 2 and. We then get an interesting chord here, G, F sharp, A, and B, and I guess technically this A is a suspension no matter how you cut it. It's a 9/8 suspension over the bass, but interestingly enough the tie doesn't follow over in the written music as well, so we have a suspension, a 7/6 suspension here as well. So I guess you could call this a 4/7 chord with a 9/8 suspension in the alto, but I think is more likely is actually we have 4 accented non-chord tones here, and there's this idea of maybe 4 going to 5, but I think the chord that more is associated with this beat, with beat 3, is A7, A, C sharp, E, and G, which coincides with literally beat 3 and, but there's a lot of counterpoint and motion going on at the same time, so I think extrapolating the idea of 5/7 happening here is more likely, which is our A7 chord that we have here on beat 3 and with a couple of accented non-chord tones. It's an interesting beat for sure. You could call this 4/7 going to 5/7, or I'm just calling it 5/7. Really, they're more or less doing the same thing. There's definitely ingredients for 4 happening here. Regardless, we have B, D, F sharp, and B, so a deceptive progression happening here. That's B minor, which is our submedian. We have some passing tones in the lower voices as well. Before we get G, B, E, and D, that's E minor 7 over G. We know that Bach loves 2/6/5 chords. We see a similar cadential formula as we have at the end of the A section, as well as kind of similar to the cadential formula that we have at the end of the first phrase in the A section as well. And then we're taken to A, E, and C sharp. That is an A7, or sorry, A major chord. There's no G in this chord. So we have a 5 chord, no passing 7th this time, it's just 2/6 going to 5, and of course we cadence on 1. And this D major chord functions just like the A major chord does at the end of the second phrase in the B section. It is our dominant now in the key of G major, so this is very clearly an eliding phrase where the chord is being recontextualized going into the next phrase, as its function is different at the end of the phrase. So it's now our dominant in the key of G major, and instead of going to G major, we get a bit of a deceptive progression. We get A minor here, and we see a figuration that we've seen before, except for we see it in the opposite direction. We see an inversion of what we have going on in these bass lines here in the first section. So we have A, C, A, and E. That's A minor in root position with a passing tone in the bass. So transitive progression, 2 typically goes to 5 rather than 5 going to 2. Then we have C, D, A, and F sharp. That's D7 over C, which is 5/4-2. And then if we take this A back into account here, this is a chord tone, and it does change the quality of the chord. This would be a 6/4 chord here. And the reason why I'm marking these in this chorale is because the inverting of the chord over the span of the beat seems to be a prominent theme or device that Bach is using in his throughout the chorale. So I figured it's better to be consistent with marking when a chord is being inverted and when we have a non-chord tone, because it's just something that's happening across the whole chorale. We then have B, D, G, and G. That's G major in first inversion. The seventh does resolve down by step, but it does so via an ornament, which is this re-inversion of the chord, because the 5/4-2 chord has the seventh and the bass, and we would expect that to go to a root position, a first inversion tonic triad. We then have a passing tone in the bass before we get D, D, G, and B, which is a 1/6/4 chord. So we're getting again this idea of the chord being revoiced and re-inverted over the span of 2 beats before the chord gets turned into first inversion again on beat 4 and. So this idea, this figuration here changes. It has an impact on the harmonic rhythm because it feels like a new chord is happening, especially because the other voices around it are moving, but the bass is so active that it really feels like the rotation of the chord is actually having an impact on the chord progression, which it does, even though it's actually kind of spacing it out. But we're getting ready for our final perfect authentic cadence in the key of G. We have C, E, G, and A, which is another A minor 7 chord in first inversion. That's 2/6/5. Bach loves those. This D is a passing tone, this A is a chord tone, this C is a chord tone. And the reason why I'm not marking these A's here is because this is a common thing that Bach does with 2/6/5 chords. We see this skip down to A, where we have this 2/5-1 in the bass as opposed to 4/5-1 in the bass. And we end up getting an incomplete chord here. We have A, E, G, and A, which would be a thirdless A minor 7 chord. So I don't think it's as important to note rather than a chord like this, or like a 6/4 chord in this case, because it's part of the figuration of the bass and not part of the cadence, but still the entire chord is intact, even when inverted. Regardless, we have D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord, with not a passing 7th, but the 1 of the chord going to the 5 of the chord, and we step up to the 3rd of the G major chord, G, B, D, and G, which is our tonic triad in root position. And that is today's analysis. This is a pretty straightforward chorale to analyze. I think this is a good example of eliding phrases. I've been talking about modulation a lot, and the modulations that occur in this chorale in particular, I mean, we do have a mixture of direct and common chord here, so it's good to see them juxtaposed with one another, but the fact that we have this trail of falling dominance in the key structure of this chorale is very interesting, very textbook Bach. So it's cool that we're seeing it in an actual piece. We took the time to analyze it, but the chord progressions are more or less fully normative. We get a good demonstration of diatonic harmony throughout the entirety of the chorale. No secondary dominance, but we do get some modulations. So yeah, a couple of interesting progressions, like the occurrence of the 6/4 chords on the offbeats and on the numbered beats is actually interesting as well. But I think that's where I'm going to cap my analysis off for today. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. If you're interested in going along with me on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification icon. I upload once a day. I have hundreds of videos scheduled for the future. Thank you again so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.